It was 2 o'clock in the early morning, and in Florida, USA, a cold wind was blowing from the Atlantic Ocean. Away from all the noise of the outside world, an unusual silence hung heavily in the Situation Room inside a massive mansion equipped with top-level security arrangements. All the large windows in that room were covered with curtains. The only light present was the blue glow coming from the LED screens fixed on the wall. In that blue light sat the man who ruled the most powerful nation on earth, a nation capable of controlling the very fate of the world, the American President Donald Trump. That day, the Trump who was present in that room was not the one we usually see in news or on TV cracking jokes at rallies. There was a deep sense of anticipation on his face because what he was intently watching were not imaginary scenes from a Hollywood film, but rather live footage of a top secret military operation being carried out on his direct orders thousands of miles away on the soil of another superpower nation. He was watching live as the very best commandos of the American military, considered the most dangerous force the world has ever seen, were carrying out an operation to abduct the head of a nation. The target was clear: Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, the land of oil tycoons. The highly secured presidential palace at the heart of that country. Inside that residence, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro was in deep sleep. Maduro believed that the hundreds of bodyguards stationed around his palace, the radars constantly scanning the skies, and the security cameras spread throughout the city would keep him safe. Exhausted from a whole day of administrative affairs, he slept peacefully. But he did not know that within a few moments, his fate was about to change. In that sleep, he had no idea that American soldiers had already reached his doorstep to abduct him. Meanwhile, while Maduro was sleeping, a frightening move was taking place kilometers away in the Caribbean Sea. In the pitch darkness, America's ultra-modern stealth helicopters were zooming past just 100 feet above sea level. These helicopters did not have the deafening noise that ordinary helicopters make. They were flying as low as possible to avoid being detected by Venezuelan radars. Inside those helicopters, built with technology that could evade radar detection, were the Delta Force commandos, the elite force of the American military. They are trained to carry out any impossible mission anywhere in the world. Each one of them had a clear understanding of their assigned mission. Like a shadow, they crossed the Venezuelan border without anyone noticing. The next phase of the operation was about to begin. Just before the army reached Maduro's residence, the Venezuelan people witnessed another phase of modern warfare. A massive cyber attack was launched targeting the city of Caracas. Experts from the American Cyber Warfare Division infiltrated Venezuela's power grid. It all happened in the blink of an eye. The electricity supply to the city was completely cut off. The once brightly lit city of Caracas was suddenly plunged into darkness. The streetlights went out. Even the emergency lights in hospitals and security centers were rendered inoperative. The state-of-the-art surveillance cameras surrounding Maduro's palace shut their eyes. The security alarms fell silent. All around there was only a frightening darkness. American helicopters arrived above Maduro's residence. Despite the strong winds, the pilots controlled the aircraft without the slightest hesitation. Commandos rappelled down ropes onto the roof of the residence. When their boots touched the roof, not even the slightest sound was made. Before the Venezuelan guards could sense anything, the commandos had already taken their positions. They did not have to break in through the front door or the gate. They had precise information about where Maduro's bedroom was located. With the help of satellite imagery and inside leaks, they had memorized every nook and corner of the house. They went straight to the window of the room where Maduro was sleeping. Without making a sound, they opened the window and slipped inside. Since they were wearing night vision goggles, they could see every movement inside the room as clearly as in broad daylight, even in that pitch darkness. Laser guns were pointed towards every corner of the room. President Maduro, who was in a deep and comfortable sleep, woke up sensing something unusual. Along with the coolness from the AC in the room, he sensed the presence of someone unfamiliar. When he opened his eyes, at first he couldn't make sense of anything. Since there was no electricity, the entire room was in darkness. But through that darkness, he saw laser beams pointing towards his chest. He couldn't believe what he was seeing right in front of his eyes. armed enemies had entered his bedroom, right inside his own security fortress. It took him a moment to realize whether this was a dream or reality. Maduro, who used to boast that no one could touch him as the undisputed leader of Venezuela, trembled with fear of death at that moment. In a desperate attempt to save his life, he jumped up from the bed. There was only one thought in his mind: the safe room. Next to his bedroom, there was a secure room made of bulletproof and bomb-proof steel, built especially for heads of state to hide in during emergencies. Once he reached there and locked the door from inside, no one from outside would be able to open it. He could sit there safely until the army arrived for help. With all his might, Maduro ran towards the door of that room. It was a matter of life and death. The soldiers were running behind him, but the American commandos had come prepared for all this. They had anticipated every move of Maduro. Maduro grabbed the safe room's door and tried to open it, but suddenly a commando leapt on him from the darkness. Maduro tried to close the door, but hands as strong as steel stopped him. Within moments, other commandos also rushed in there. It turned into a wrestling match, a test of strength between the president of a country and a foreign soldier. But Maduro could not hold his ground against the well-trained soldiers. They surrounded him. Using force, they subdued him. All this took just 5 minutes. The helicopter landed, they entered through the window and captured Maduro, all in the blink of an eye. One of the fastest military operations the world has ever seen. The president of Venezuela is now in the custody of the American military. Sitting in that dark room in Florida, thousands of miles away, Trump watched this scene and nodded in satisfaction. As the image of Maduro being subdued by soldiers became clear on the screen, the senior generals in that room heaved a sigh of relief. The operation has been successful. A few days after watching the Venezuelan president being captured from that dark room in Florida, the American president Donald Trump gave an interview to Fox News. The words he spoke in that interview took the world by surprise. With a light-hearted smile, he said this: "It was just like watching a television show, right? To be honest, if you had seen those visuals, you wouldn't believe it. I actually watched the entire operation as if I was watching a movie or a TV series. It was one of the most shocking and terrifying military operations in modern world history. Disregarding the sovereignty of another country, they barged into the residence of the president, elected by the people of that nation, and abducted him." The next morning, the world woke up to this news. Breaking news flashes kept appearing and disappearing on TV channels. Even the news anchors themselves couldn't believe the news they were reading. Venezuela's longtime president, Nicolás Maduro, has been ousted. In a midnight lightning operation named Operation Absolute Resolve, the American army arrested Maduro from the heart of Caracas. This news spread like wildfire. The streets of Venezuela came to a standstill. World leaders called for emergency meetings. With this incident, mainly two big questions arose before the world. Firstly, why did America do this? Why did they take such a huge risk and abduct the president of another country? It was the second question that was even more frightening. Can America so easily abduct the president or prime minister of another country? If that's the case, then what is the relevance of international laws? Which country in the world can now sleep peacefully? Will every country now have to live in fear that America can snatch away their rulers at any moment? There were plenty of questions in front of each country. But this operation to capture Maduro was not something that was decided or carried out overnight. The script for that night in January 2026 had been prepared months in advance. To be precise, it was from August 2025 onwards. That was the time when the whole world believed that everything was normal in Venezuela. But in the busy streets of Caracas, there was some eyes in the crowd that no one noticed. The American intelligence agency, the CIA, had secretly sent a small team to Venezuela. They even had to follow Maduro's shadow. The instructions given to that CIA team are very clear. We must know Maduro's every brock. They meticulously recorded Maduro's every movement. Where he lives, which room he sleeps in, when he travels, what food he eats, what clothes he wears. They even leaked information about his pets. Why do they need information about his pets? Because the time Maduro takes his dog for a walk, the time he feeds his pets, all these are part of his daily routine. The American intelligence was ready to take advantage of even those small gaps. Apart from this, the CIA had one more powerful weapon in their hands: spies who were operating from within the Venezuelan government itself. A government official from Maduro's trusted circle was leaking information to America. Through the secret source, the CIA was constantly receiving updates about Maduro's whereabouts every moment and any changes in his security arrangements. Maduro had no idea that there were enemies right inside his own palace. It might sound simple when you hear it, but for the CIA, this was a mission between life and death. The small CIA team sent to Venezuela did not have any kind of diplomatic protection. That means they had not gone there under the guise of embassy officials. They had arrived disguised as travelers and businessmen. So, if they had been caught during this operation, the situation would have become very serious. America would not be able to officially rescue them. America would simply wash its hands off, saying these are not our people. They would have had to face either brutal torture or even death in a Venezuelan prison. Those officers risked their own lives to lay a trap for Maduro on the streets of Caracas. The CIA had already set up its network in Venezuela. Every move of Maduro was under their surveillance. But before tightening the net, before unleashing the military, America made one last attempt. They needed a trigger. There had to be a reason, or at least they had to convince the world that they tried for a peaceful solution. That was a phone call. In November 2025, a crucial conversation took place between the American President Donald Trump and Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. It was not a friendly conversation. On the contrary, it was an ultimatum given by the most powerful leader in the world to another leader. In that phone call, Trump spoke very bluntly. Give up power, leave the country. That is the best option in front of you. If you step down peacefully, we can guarantee your safety. Maduro had two options before him. One, to yield to Trump's threat and leave the country. Two, to challenge America and remain in power. Maduro, who considered himself a fighter, chose the second path. He flatly rejected Trump's demand. He was not willing to give up his country or his power. This decision turned everything upside down. At a press conference held after the operation, the words spoken by American Secretary of State Marco Rubio were about Maduro's decision. Rubio's words were as follows: I want to make one thing clear. Nicolás Maduro had plenty of opportunities to avoid this disaster. We had given him very decent offers, but instead of accepting any of them, he decided to behave like a wild animal or a madman, taking things lightly. What we saw last night was the result of that attitude. After Maduro's refusal, the operation moved into its most extensive phase. Far away from Venezuela, thousands of miles away in a secret military base in Kentucky, USA, a strange construction was underway. There, they built a duplicate of the Venezuelan president's palace, the very house where he lived. The size of the rooms, the position of the windows, the size of the doors, even the number of steps in the staircase, everything was made to match the real house in Venezuela. Delta Force commandos trained for days in this duplicate house, practicing which window to jump through, how many seconds to climb the stairs, how many steps to reach Maduro's bedroom. They did all this repeatedly, learning it by heart so well that they could walk through the house blindfolded without losing their way. While training was going on in Kentucky, American forces began to circle around Venezuela. These were moves to completely encircle Venezuela. Fighter jets, special operations aircraft from the Navy, and Reaper drones watching from the sky were all deployed around the Venezuelan border. Surveillance systems were set up so tight that even a fly could not pass unnoticed. Venezuela is a Christian majority country. During Christmas, most soldiers and officials would be on leave and security arrangements would be relaxed. Trump decided to take advantage of this opportunity. On Christmas Day, Trump gave preliminary approval for this operation. But nature was against them. For days after Christmas, heavy rain and bad weather continued in the Venezuelan skies, making it unsafe for helicopters to fly. The American forces waited patiently. Finally, the wait ended. By the night of January 2nd, 2026, The weather cleared and the winds calmed. At 10:46 p.m., the crucial message reached the military commanders from Washington. Donald Trump had given his approval. At that moment, engines started roaring on American warships anchored in the Caribbean Sea and at secret bases. The moment Trump's order was received, one of the largest air operations in American military history began. From 20 military bases around the world, more than 100 warplanes took off at the same time, from stealth bombers invisible to radar to giant cargo planes. It was like a giant shark coming to encircle the small country of Venezuela. The ordinary people of Venezuela knew nothing, they were asleep. But what first shook their sleep was not a huge explosion, but a terrifying silence. As the first step of the operation, the American Cyber Warfare Unit hacked the electricity distribution network of Caracas city. In an instant, the entire city was plunged into darkness. Hospitals, streets, homes all lost power. No one understood what was happening. Thinking it was just a normal power cut, many went back to sleep. As soon as darkness spread, fire began to rain from the sky. American warplanes showered missiles targeting Venezuela's air defense systems and radar stations around Caracas. This was to clear the way for helicopters to enter the city. In this attack, the radar stations were destroyed. Unfortunately, about 40 Venezuelan soldiers and civilians lost their lives in this airstrike. By 2:01 a.m., with all defenses broken, Delta Force helicopters rode over Maduro's compound. The Venezuelan presidential guards fought back, firing their guns from below at the helicopters. One American helicopter was damaged by bullets, but that did not affect the mission. The commandos descended and did not wait to open the doors. They blasted through the building's wall and entered. The area shook with gunfire and explosions. It took the commandos just 3 minutes to reach near Maduro inside the building. At that time, Maduro was sleeping in the bedroom with his wife, Celia Flores. Hearing the explosion, Maduro woke up in shock, sensed danger, and ran with his wife to his safe room. But fate was against him. Within just 5 minutes of the army entering the building, Maduro was captured. The head of a nation, kneeling at gunpoint near his own bedroom, was taken straight from there to the USS Iwo Jima, an American naval ship anchored in the Caribbean Sea. From there, he was taken to the infamous Guantanamo Bay prison in Cuba, a place known for housing terrorists. Even there, the journey did not end. Finally, he was brought to Stewart Air National Guard Base in New York. The next morning, the world saw a shocking sight: the president of another country in chains standing with his head bowed on American soil. Disregarding all international protocols, these images were publicly released. This is where the biggest question arises: why did America do this? Trump supporters and American media say this operation was to restore democracy in Venezuela and to stop drug trafficking. But those who study history know that American eagles never fly over a country for nothing. The real reason is only one: the country with the largest proven crude oil reserves in the world is not Saudi Arabia, Russia, or America, it is Venezuela. About 303 billion barrels of oil lie beneath Venezuela's soil. But the issue is not just the oil reserves. Venezuelan oil has a special quality: it is thick and contains sulfur, that is, it is heavy and sour crude oil. This is the most suitable oil for making diesel and tar for road construction. In contrast, the oil available in America is light and sweet. Here is where business comes in. Since the 1970s, most American oil refineries have been built to process this heavy crude. That means for American refineries to function, Venezuelan oil is absolutely essential. Until 1999, things were favorable for America. Venezuelan oil was available to American companies at dirt cheap prices. But once Hugo Chavez came to power, the story changed. He nationalized the oil industry in Venezuela. His slogan was that Venezuela's oil is for the Venezuelan people. He introduced laws declaring that the government has complete ownership over the oil reserves. With this, the American corporate giants lost their grip on Venezuela. Their profits declined. This angered the American companies. They put pressure on the then American President George Bush. As a result of that, in 2002, there was an attempted coup against Chavez. Even though that failed, from 2005 onwards, America started imposing sanctions against Venezuela. That same grudge is what has now reached the point of shackling Maduro in 2026. It is not democracy, but rather the ownership of 303 billion barrels of oil that is the real reason behind this war. In 2019, during his first term, Donald Trump imposed strict restrictions on Venezuelan crude oil exports with the aim of breaking Venezuela's backbone. Until then, the flow of Venezuelan oil, which had dominated the world market, came to a halt. Today, Venezuela produces only a very small percentage of the world's total oil. But even though production has decreased, one fact remains: the deposits beneath the earth are still there, no one has taken them away. It is these deposits that have caught the eye of Trump and the American corporates. Just the statement Trump made the day after this operation is enough to understand its real intention. Without any hesitation, he said this: "It was the biggest robbery in American history. They stole our oil from us." Trump is calling it our oil and saying they stole it, when he's actually talking about the natural resources on the soil of Venezuela, an independent country. Trump described Venezuela's right to control its own resources as theft. Finally, what he said was that American companies would go there to rebuild Venezuela. What this really means is that American oil companies will take over Venezuela's oil fields. As mentioned earlier, Venezuelan heavy crude oil is essential for American refineries to function. Without that, they cannot move forward. Here, there's yet another factor that worries America. At present, 68% of the oil produced by Venezuela is bought by China. For America, it is unbearable that the largest oil reserve in Latin America, right under their nose, is being taken away by their sworn enemy, China. Preventing Venezuela from turning into a petrol pump for China is also one of the main objectives of this intervention. By removing Maduro, Trump will be able to stop the flow of oil to China and redirect it towards America. The United States has charged Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores with narco-terrorism offenses. The allegation is that they were involved in smuggling drugs into America. A look at the statistics will make this clear. The majority of the cocaine flowing into America comes from countries like Colombia, Guatemala, and Mexico. If you examine the route, it is smuggled via the Pacific Ocean. Venezuela does not even have a coastline on the Pacific Ocean. The route through Venezuela is via the Caribbean. Only a very small percentage of the total drug trafficking happens through Venezuela. Moreover, the biggest drug crisis America is facing today is not cocaine but fentanyl. Thousands of Americans die every year due to fentanyl overdose. This fentanyl mainly comes from Mexico, not from Venezuela. If Trump's aim is to save the lives of the American people, then he should be targeting Mexico, not Venezuela. Or else, it should be his own ally, Colombia. But instead, he chose Venezuela. Why is that? The answer is simple. Neither Mexico nor Colombia has 303 billion barrels of oil. Before he was caught, Maduro himself pointed this out in an interview. He compared this to the Iraq War in 2003. Back then, the justification America gave for attacking Saddam Hussein was that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. Years later, the world realized that there were no such weapons there. It was a blatant lie. The same strategy is now being used in Venezuela as well. It is quite reasonable to suspect that this whole narco-terrorism narrative is just a fake excuse to take control of the oil wells. On that morning when Maduro was chained and taken to America, it was not just Venezuela that woke up, but the entire world. The international community was shocked to hear that news. Warplanes draped in the American flag carried out a blatant invasion in the skies of a sovereign nation. As soon as this news broke, the Latin American countries united in opposition. Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Uruguay together with Spain, issued a very strong joint statement. Not just the neighboring countries, even the United Nations, which acts as the conscience keeper of the world, raised its voice against this. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres described this as a blatant violation of the UN Charter. It was this fundamental principle of the UN that no country has the right to interfere in the sovereignty of another country that America disregarded. Many countries called this neo-colonialism. Just as the British once came in ships and conquered countries, today America comes in planes and attacks countries to loot their resources. The methods have changed, but the aim remains the same. Was what Trump did legal? The answer is clearly no. According to the American Constitution, the power to declare war against another country does not rest with the President, but with the Congress. Without the approval of Congress, the President cannot unilaterally declare war. Trump did not seek Congress's approval for this operation. This is a violation of the Constitution. Among American lawmakers, the demand to impeach Trump is growing stronger. But to get around this, the Trump administration has come up with a rather strange justification. What they are saying is this is not a war, it is merely a law enforcement action. Just like the police go to catch an accused drug smuggler, our army went. For that, Congress's approval is not required, they say. According to international law, as per Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter, any intrusion upon the sovereignty of a country is illegal. So what America did is a clear violation of the law. But who will question them? That is where the weapon called veto comes in. America has veto power in the UN Security Council. With just one vote, America can cancel any resolution that comes up against them. That is why it is certain that no action will be taken against America in this matter. Chanakya is a trustworthy Malayalam channel that analyzes crucial factors shaping our world, such as global politics, defense strategies, and business changes. If you or your brand would like to advertise with us, please do get in touch. The number to contact is 99475 0027.